America's listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The Supreme Court will take up a monumental case Friday about vaccine mandates.
Justices are fast-tracking 2 cases about vaccine and testing mandates from the Biden administration. Up first is a question about the OSHA rule requiring businesses with 100 or more employees to ensure workers are fully vaccinated or tested weekly. A challenge was filed by several Republican-led states, business groups, and religious organizations. A federal appeals court has said the administration can enforce that shot or test rule. The justices will also hear arguments about the president's executive order mandating health care workers at facilities receiving federal Medicare and Medicaid dollars to be fully vaccinated unless eligible for a medical or religious exemption. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The parents of a teenager charged with a fatal Michigan school shooting will be back in court Friday trying to get their bond reduced from $500,000 to $100,000. James and Jennifer Crumbly have been locked up since December 4th, unable to meet that bond. They're charged with involuntary manslaughter for making a gun available to their son, Ethan. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers officially release Antonio Brown 4 days after he tossed off his pads and left in the middle of the game against the New York Jets.
Brown on Wednesday, through his lawyer, issued a statement claiming irresponsibility by the Bucs, making him play through the pain and even forcing medication upon him. Head coach Bruce Arians Thursday addressed AB's alleged ankle issues.
He ever asked a trainer or a doctor about his ankle. He never went through, that's the normal protocol. You go through protocols.
Arians claims that Brown expressed frustration at halftime during Sunday's game over the amount of targets he was receiving. Brown doubling down on Thursday by posting screenshots of alleged texts regarding his rehab process with Arians. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, cause everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous big back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Dale's, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life and bigger meals happen here.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we are on a Friday. Jose and I will struggle through it. We don't look forward to it. We got 2 whole days, no tall tales, no tailgaters, no second. Well, the Second Amendment will still be there. We just won't be talking about it on the air. But we'll be back on Monday. Starting out today with Zemi Ikotny. Looks like the folks in the editorial boardrooms at the newspaper started their weekends early today. The Daily News, our view, more families needed to open homes to foster children. Yeah. In October 2021, there were 474 children in foster care in Guam and about 41 foster homes, according to Faye Faye Muiko, the social service supervisor for home evaluation placement section of the Department of Public Health and Social Services. Clearly, more foster parents are needed. That's about it. There isn't a whole lot more to say. And then for the Post, Guam hires who care for children should be better vetted, trained to handle stress on the job. Cleo Noni Maria Milan Lamb was in tears and apologized in an interview with the Daily Post Thursday as she described how she should have handled a tense moment during her watch at the Department of Youth Affairs as a youth service worker assistant. At 22 years old, this young woman was placed under the public spotlight after she was charged with the assault of a 12-year-old child under her care at Youth Affairs. The child, she said, was disrespectful. A 12-year-old being disrespectful? I'm shocked.
Say it isn't so.
There is no justification for hitting a child, especially in a in the situation Lamb was in. Her actions on the job reflect on the government of Guam, and Guam was supposed to put the child under the responsibility of someone who would look after the child. I have a feeling that the kids that wind up at Youth Affairs aren't the best behaved kids on the island. That's a suspicion that I have. I can't verify it, but I suspect. Lamb's situation can be and should be an eye-opener about GovGuam's process of vetting, hiring, and training front-facing workers who deal directly with children in schools, juvenile facilities, and other government settings where a great deal of trust and responsibility are given. These workers must be fully equipped to handle the pressures of the job so that the children are protected. In Lamb's case, she said she was thrust into a role she was not equipped to handle. 22 years old. Her brief time with the Department of Youth Affairs was cut short following allegations that she punched the child at the facility's cottage homes, temporary homes for juveniles with behavioral issues. She had been hired in August of 2021, and by December she was fired a few weeks after the alleged incident. How did we find out about this, Jose? Wouldn't this be one of those personnel matters?
Yeah. Obviously, she's never worked with the port.
Yeah, if she had worked at the port, they wouldn't even admit that she'd ever worked there. Yeah, they can't talk. They're prohibited at the port. They're prohibited from talking about personnel matters. Just an absolute prohibition. Somebody said, "How many people you got working here?" Hey, stop. We can't talk about personnel matters.
Denied.
Back to the editorial. Quote, "In a blink of an eye, it was all just taken away. All because I made a mistake. All because I did not have proper support, proper anything." Whatever happened to the old idea of individual responsibility, I wonder? I was just thrown out into the wolves. She was she was at agriculture, animal control, or DYA?
Her name is fitting.
Threw the lamb to the wolves. Yeah, they threw the lamb to the wolves, and she became a scapegoat, as it were.
We thought that was her job.
The Lamb, who spoke to the Post following her arraignment hearing Thursday before Superior Court Magistrate Judge Jonathan Kwan. Lamb was indicted on charges of assault by a peace officer as a third-degree felony. Wow. And official misconduct is a misdemeanor. Third-degree felony.
She turned into mutton.
Wow. Let's hope she sticks around here on the island and doesn't decide she's just going to take it on the lamb. She had allegedly admitted to investigators that she punched the child, said she was fed up with the child's disrespect. "I've held my composure for so long. I've held not having help. I've held not having anybody listening to me, treating me as if I was a client. One day I got tired of not being able to be heard or helped and had a quick remembrance of my upbringing, my growing up. Showing that kind of disrespect, we got that and a lot worse." So kind of tells you a little something, huh? Maybe she got punched around a little bit when she was a child. "I didn't know how else to reflect my actions into my job that day. I made a big mistake and I understand that, but now it's just where am I going to go from here, learning from what I've done. I apologize for everything that I have done. I didn't mean to do what I did." Lamb's case has yet to be resolved in court, and in the eyes of the law, she's presumed innocent until proven otherwise or until she admits guilt. But Lamb's case does offer a cautionary lesson. With the recent rush of hirings of dozens of teacher aides and one-on-one aides for children with special needs in the Department of Education, we hope that the vetting process for these new hires is done properly. And we also hope the new recruits have been trained properly and are truly qualified for the jobs they were hired for. It's to the detriment of the vulnerable kids if hiring and training processes expose our children to the risk of being hurt when emotionally stressed workers are ill-equipped to safely handle the stresses of the job. Add the Wuhan virus pandemic's cabin fever to the mix, and GovGuam needs to take this concern seriously. Could be not a bad editorial. Okay, if we go from there to the card, unless I've got somebody in the green room. Nobody in the green room. Okay, let's take a look at the card then. Of course, I start out with Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism, following up with more of Paul Zerzan in an item labeled Z versus Peter Pan. Then the wisdom of crowds versus the madness of crowds, National Guard versus the GovGuam Retirement Fund, Victor Davis Hanson versus the intersection, Turley, not Rurley, Turley versus the intersection, winding up with Tall Tales versus Separatists. So starting out with Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. once again, just to jog your memory, the idea here is that there's a narrative and there's truth. And in the year 2021 and 2022, so often the narrative overcomes the truth. One who speaks the truth in contrast to the narrative gets canceled, etc. So this sign shows you the difference between the narrative and the truth. The letters anyone can see are red, but the word is orange, right? And then this one, anyone can see the letters are orange, but the word is red. So if you look at number 2 here, you got to say that word is red. It's not orange, it's red. Don't let your eyes play tricks on you. And this nice little paradigm arose because when Paul Zerzan commented on this, what we always call red rice at the fiestas, Paul Zerzan said, hey, come on, you guys. You wrote a letter to the editor saying, red rice isn't red, it's orange. And the Daily News came roaring back saying, readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone. So the fact that Paul Zerzan said, hey, you guys, it's really orange. Let's be factual about this. He was out of bounds because the narrative says that orange rice is red. So we call that a good example of systemic racism brought to us by Paul Zerzan, who's a pretty creative fellow, not afraid of expressing himself, and a nice mix of imagination and assertiveness. He wrote another letter to the editor today, which probably will make the show on Monday when the Daily News comes back. How dare he say that, right? So this is Z. From now on, I'm going to be calling Paul Zerzan Z. Kind of like, he makes the sign of the Z. Yeah. So it's Z versus Peter Pan. And it ran in the Daily News, the Post today, and it's titled, Living in Never, Never Land. Guam suffers from collective Peter Pan syndrome and red rice. The proposed Vista Del Mar development and the fishing platform at the Paseo are but 3 of the latest manifestations of this personality illness that afflicts our culture on Guam. In December, I publicly stated that a choti-colored rice was orange and not red, and should be properly called orange rice. The vitriolic backlash on social media against this simple truth boils down to a pathological denial of reality that can only lead to disaster in our changing world. A theme I've kind of been beating on myself ever since we started talking about systemic racism here on the program. Plans to ruin a pristine beach and major archaeological site adjacent to Punta dos Amantes with a major resort and residential subdivision is another dangerous delusion. Guam is already full of hotels emptied by the pandemic. When the pandemic ends, they can never return to full capacity, something I've been saying myself, but he's probably got a better reason than the one I advanced. I just hadn't thought of it in those terms. But he says they'll never return to full capacity because the world they were built for is gone forever. The populations of East Asia are aging and shrinking, and so are their economies, so they will never again be a significant source of tourists for Guam. That's certainly true of Japan. Japan is just aging out. A low birth rate, a long-lived population, and they're really getting short of people to actually do the work. And then their economy's been in bad shape since the 90s. They're remember, Jose, at the time when it looked like the Japanese were going to take over the world. They bought Pebble Beach Golf Course. They bought Ken Jones's house up on the cliff. They were just coming in here and buying everything. And wow, what an economic powerhouse. China, where's that? That's where we were back in those days. The best we can hope for is to induce boomers from the mainland U.S. to retire on Guam. It's not a bad idea, especially for folks who are retired military because of the military medicine, commissaries, etc. here on the island. Yet by far the greatest monument to our obsessive, I will never grow up stupidity is the big, beautiful fishing platform built in the Paseo parking lot too far from the water to catch fish from. To build a usable fishing pier would be to acknowledge that the old days of fishing from rocks and reefs is gone, and that in a changing world, Guam must change too. This, of course, unacceptable in Never Never Land, so we waste money sabotaging any and all progress to deny any economic, demographic, or cultural change that would threaten our collective Peter Pan pledge to never grow up. Well, you know, whenever you see Paul Zerzan, that is the Z, whenever you see his name, you know there's going to be something interesting there. Very possibly provocative, potentially controversial. That's why I really like him. Okay, yesterday I read an article about Abraham Lincoln and separatism and the Civil War. And the point of the article was that Abraham Lincoln wasn't, at the beginning of the Civil War, wasn't that interested in freeing the slaves. He had other motives, primarily economic motives. Paul called in and reminded me that the South seceded because of slavery, a point that the article I read didn't make, a point that I didn't make, and a point upon which I agreed with Paul, that the motivating factor for the South was slavery. When Abraham Lincoln was elected in November, like 4th maybe, and on December 20th, South Carolina seceded because they were afraid that Lincoln would do exactly what finally happened, free the slaves. So it was a good article, and it was from the Southern point of view. It advanced what has been referred to as the lost cause theory that the left hates. They want to beat up on that all the time. So I'm following that up and following up Mr. Z with an article from the same source, Abbeville Institute, and it's on the card is The Wisdom of Crowds versus the Madness of Crowds. And it's an article in that particular magazine by Philip Lee, not L-E-E like Robert E., but L-E-I-G-H like Vivian or Janet. So here's how it goes. Peter Thiel, a co-founder of PayPal, along with Tesla's Elon Musk, and an early Facebook investor, is famed for his thought-provoking questions. One example is a question he typically asks entrepreneurs seeking venture capital from him. What are you certain to be true that most of your peers would disagree with you about? And here's an example. Copernicus, for example, might have answered that the solar system is heliocentric instead of geocentric, as was commonly supposed in his days. In other words, conventional wisdom, Ptolemaic wisdom was that the earth was the center of our system. You know, God made the earth, etc. And Copernicus came along and said, no, it's not the earth, it's the sun, heliocentric. It turned out that Copernicus was right after all. A similar question concerns the wisdom of crowds. Think back to 2004 when perhaps 2/3 of homeowners believed real estate prices would continue to rise. The ensuing rise reflected the wisdom of crowds. But in 2008, when over 90% of homeowners acted as if prices would continue to rise indefinitely, and I remember that. I remember that mindset. You know, buy real estate. You know, God's still making people. He quit making land a long time ago. The price of real estate is always going to go up. That's what was conventional wisdom at the time. The result was a speculative bubble that reflected the madness of crowds. Thiel's point is that our challenge is to try and identify when the wisdom of crowds transitions into the madness of crowds. Now, I hope that we serve that function here on Tall Tales, that the idea of listening to Tall Tales isn't to find out what everybody knows, the common sense and conventional wisdom, etc. The purpose of Tall Tales is to be a little bit provocative, iconoclastic, taking a little different path than what you might hear or read somewhere else. The Thiel's point is that our challenge is to try and identify when the wisdom of crowds transitions into the madness of crowds. This can be applied to Civil War history. When 2/3 of historians contend that slavery was the prime reason for the secession of the 7 cotton states, they're probably right. But when 98% believe it was the only important cause of secession and that secession caused the war, they're probably wrong. Instead of thinking things through for themselves, they yield to a herd instinct. And the only way to validate the herd is to extrapolate the stampede of condemnation for the South until the tenets, T-E-N-E-T-S, not tenants, until the tenets collapse upon themselves. Such extrapolation has already become manifest in several ways. One is it demands that Confederate statues be contextualized, escalating into removal and escalating again into outright destruction via meltdown. Another way is failing to recognize that the Confederate Constitution banned subsidies for private industry, restrictive tariffs, and public works spending. 3 non-slavery reasons for forming a new union, especially if you understand the Whig theory of government and Abraham Lincoln's theory of government. A third way is to completely miss the point that the 7 cotton states could have been allowed to leave peacefully, thereby enabling both sides to avoid the Civil War and ridding the Union of slavery. A fourth is to realize that it was the North that went to war over tariffs, not the South. The North wanted restrictive tariffs to transform their leading manufacturing sectors into virtual domestic monopolies. Peter Thiel uses a couple of rules of thumb to identify when the wisdom of crowds has transitioned into the madness of crowds. First is to be aware when option X dominates over non-X. When the first opinion dominates, there is little examination of its weaknesses. Second and foremost is when advocates of opinion X have become so powerful that they do not permit debate and censor dissenting voices. That's where we are now, isn't it? What happens when that happens, Thiel concludes that the option non-X is more likely the valid one. In terms of Civil War history, the dismissal of dissenting voices is the so-called lost cause mythology suggests that the conventional wisdom regarding the causes of war and the comparative morality of the respective sides has transitioned into the madness of crowds. It explains the mania to demonize the Confederacy and even the Confederate soldier without debate. It explains why PhD students will not undertake any research projects that fail to support the North good, South bad dichotomy. It explains the monopolization of one-dimensional opinion within the academy, journalism, and the cultural elite generally. It happens an awful lot. And you could have substituted the words colony bad, sovereignty good, and the struggle of the separatists to become option X and stomp out option non-X in the process with their 20-page supplement. Let them take notes. 9 days before the October 1929 stock market crash that led to the Great Depression of the 1930s, Yale economics professor Irving Fisher stated that stock prices had reached what looked like a permanently high plateau 9 days before the crash. He was among the madness of the crowd. It's significant to note that Fisher was an academic expert, much like many Civil War historians today. Unfortunately, academics are the most vulnerable to a herd instinct because they are risk-averse. They cannot stand the embarrassment of condemnation by their colleagues. What's going on in the universities right now? So there's a lot of meat in this editorial here, in this article. Okay, next we've got the National Guard versus the government Guam Retirement Fund. It's not really the National Guard. It's the feds. Let's take a break, huh, Jose?
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumon. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So this is a suit that's brought by the feds against the government of Guam, and it's brought on behalf of some guardsmen, Cruz, San Nicolas, and Torrey, and Kanata. So the employees all belong to the government's defined benefit retirement plan, also referred to as the old plan, which guarantees retirement pay based on the number of years worked in Gov Guam. The more years of credited service, the higher the retirement pay, to a maximum of 85% of their average salary. Public safety workers, including firefighters and police officers, are eligible to retire several years earlier than other Gov Guam employees. Gov Guam in October 1995 cut off new enrollment in the defined benefit plan, citing its high cost, and implemented a hybrid defined contribution plan for new employees, which provides a smaller guaranteed retirement annuity. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of Jesse Cruz, who retired from the fire department in December of 2020, Raymond San Nicolas, who retired from the fire department in August of 2018, Alan Torrey, who retired from the fire department in September 2020, Andy Kanata, who joined the fire department in October 92 and is still a firefighter, and Frederick Guzman, a teacher at Kennedy High School, who currently is on military leave. They all filed USERRA complaints, United States Reserve, I can't remember what it stands for. It's It's a follow-on to the old Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act that provides certain protections for military servicemen. They all filed USERRA complaints with the U.S. Department of Labor's Veterans Employment and Training Services in 2020, alleging their rights were violated. Cruz, San Nicolas, and Torrey allege their retirement checks are smaller because the government failed to give them enough retirement credit. Kanata alleges he is now required to work about 2 more years for the fire department before he qualifies for full benefits. And Guzman alleges he will have less credited service time, which will mean a lower pension for the rest of his life. Case is being heard by Chief Judge Ramona V. Manglotna, who is the highest federal judge in the Northern Marianas, Jose.
She is indeed.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
She's the only federal judge in Northern Mariana.
There you go. So, government of Guam employees who use donated leave can't receive retirement credit for that time, according to GovGuam, which this week responded to a federal lawsuit filed by the Justice Department alleging employees were not credited for time on active military duty. So this is what this sentence means. You get retirement credit for every year of government service, and as the article says, your annuity bumps up for every year that you complete. If you are on annual leave, it still counts as service. If you're on sick leave, it still counts as service. But we have a leave sharing program in the government of Guam, and the government of Guam does not count leave that you take under the leave sharing program when it computes retirement credits. That's for everybody in the government. The lawsuit filed last September states several GovGuam employees used donated leave while on active military duty and alleges GovGuam and the retirement fund broke federal law by failing to give them retirement service credit by failing to pay their retirement contributions during the time they were on the leave sharing. GovGuam allows employees to donate unused leave to other employees. The employees involved in the lawsuit reportedly used donated GovGuam leave several times, sometimes for months at a time, while on active duty with the Guam National Guard. The lawsuit cites the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act of 1994. There's you, Sarah. Which states service members are entitled to retirement service credit in their civilian jobs while deployed. Defendants violated the law by treating employees using donated leave while on military duty as having breaks in service, the law states. The Attorney General's office, in a motion to dismiss, stated there was no discrimination because the policy regarding donated leave and retirement service credit applies equally to all GovGuam employees. Guam treats all its employees alike, the AG's office stated. USERRA only prohibits an employer from discriminating against an employee on the basis of military service. USERRA does not require GovGuam to provide preferential treatment to military service members. The retirement fund, in a response filed this week, stated that following the law and cannot receive contributions for non-creditable service, including service by any government employee on leave sharing. It stated it did not receive employee or employer retirement contributions for 4 of the 5 claimants and is not obligated to include any creditable service not paid for in full by the government employer or employee. When this leave sharing thing came along, it was after I left the government. To me, this is not a good idea. I wonder, is there a futures market somewhere for leave? Do people buy that share leave from other folks? You just got to wonder.
Did they get a free gift when they signed up for that timeshare?
Yeah, right. Is there a company that will get you out of the timeshare? Yeah, annual leave is supposed to be to allow an employee to take some time away from his job and refresh. So if you're sharing your leave with somebody else, then you're defeating the purpose of the leave. And I could understand the mindset because, you know, the way the Guard works, you're going to do weekend drill. You do weekend drill every weekend, once a month for the whole year, and then you're going to do 15 days annual training. Well, you get 15 days military leave for your annual training, but the contributions are made and it counts for retirement service. But there are also many other opportunities to go on active duty in the Guard. Sometimes Guardsmen can volunteer for extra active duty. And sometimes Guardsmen go on active duty, you know, for a year or years. So I could see that it would be really attractive during that period, you know, during that period of time to accrue retirement credit. And of course, by doing the leave sharing, they're drawing their military pay and their civilian pay during the time they're on active duty. But I think I'm going to side with, much as I like the National Guard, I think I'm going to side with the government of Guam on this one. This just seems like it kind of borders on a ripoff. I don't know how to say that in Latin, so I don't know if you could put it in your papers you file with the court, but that's my take on it. Okay, next item on the card is Victor Davis Hanson versus the insurrection. But we'll take a short break before we dive into that.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Nissan, choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Lease, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR, 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
So there we go. We got about 15 more minutes before the big halftime show here on Tall Tales. Victor David Hanson is one of my real heroes. Victor David Hanson, Thomas Sowell, and Jonathan Turley. If those guys wrote a recipe for boiled eggs, I'd probably read it because they're really good writers. Good writers, good thinkers. They comment on really important issues in a way that I think are really valuable. So Victor Davis Hanson, who is a professor, but he didn't suffer from educational altitude sickness when he climbed the ivory tower, thank goodness. And he's written a column here for Town Hall titled, "Who Are the Real Insurrectionists?" And this is what he said. Recently, Democrats have been despondent over President Joe Biden's sinking poll numbers. Poor babies. His policies on the economy, energy, foreign policy, the border, and the Wuhan virus have lost majority support. As a result, the left now variously alleges that either in 2022, when they expect to lose Congress, or in 2024, when they fear losing the presidency, Republicans will, quote, destroy democracy or stage a coup. A cynic might suggest that they praise democracy when they get elected, only to claim it is broken when they lose. Makes sense. Or they hope to avoid their defeat by trying to terrify the electorate. Or they mask their own revolutionary propensities by projecting them onto their opponents. See why I like this guy?
It's like he predicted today.
Yeah. After all, who's trying to federalize election laws into national elections contrary to the spirit of the Constitution, federalism and the words of the Constitution? Who wishes to repeal or circumvent the Electoral College? Who wishes to destroy more than 180-year-old Senate filibuster, the over 150-year-old 9-justice Supreme Court, and the more than 60-year-old 50-state union? It ain't the Republicans. Who's attacking the founding constitutional idea of 2 senators per state? The Constitution also clearly states that when the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside. Who slammed through the impeachment of former President Donald Trump without a presiding Chief Justice? Never had a president been either impeached twice or tried in the Senate as a private citizen. Who did both? The left further broke prior precedent by impeaching Trump without a special counsel's report, formal hearings, witnesses, and cross-examinations. Who exactly is violating civil rights legislation? New York City's Department of Health and Mental Hygiene in December decided to ration potentially life-saving new Wuhan virus medicines partially on the basis of race. Yeah, being a BIPOC person of a black indigenous person of color is at greater risk than white people, so they should get priority.
To the head of the line.
Yeah, get to the head of the line. All in the name of equity. The agency also allegedly used racial preferences to determine who should be first tested for Wuhan virus. Yet the racial discrimination seems in direct violation of various title clauses of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The law makes it clear that no public agency can use race or deny equal utilization of any public facility which is owned, operated, or managed by or on behalf of any state or subdivision thereof. Who's behind the new racial discrimination? You guessed it. In summer 2020, many local and state-mandated quarantines and bans on public assemblies were simply ignored with impunity if demonstrators were associated with Black Lives Matter or protesting police. Currently, the Biden administration is also flagrantly embracing the neo-Confederate idea of nullifying federal law, sanctuary cities, etc. The Biden administration has allowed nearly 2 million foreign nationals to enter the United States illegally across the southern border in hopes they will soon become loyal constituents. The administration has not asked illegal entrants either to be tested or vaccinated against Wuhan virus. Yet all U.S. citizens in the military and employed by the federal government are threatened with dismissal if they fail to become vaccinated. Such selective exemption of law-breaking non-U.S. citizens, but not millions of U.S. citizens, seems in conflict with the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. After entering the United States illegally, millions of immigrants are protected by some 550 sanctuary city jurisdictions. These revolutionary areas all brazenly nullify immigration law by refusing to allow federal immigration authorities to deport illegal immigrant lawbreakers. At various times in our nation's history, 1832, 1861 to 1865, and 1961 to 1963, America was either racked by internal violence or fought a civil war over similar state nullification of federal laws. In the last 5 years, we have indeed seen many internal threats to democracy. Hillary Clinton hired a foreign national to concoct a dossier of dirt against her presidential opponent. She disguised her own role by projecting her efforts to use Russian sources onto Trump. She used her contacts in government and media to seed the dossier to create a national hysteria about Russian collusion. Clinton urged Biden not to accept the 2020 result if he lost, and herself claimed Trump was not a legitimately elected president. It was her turn. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has violated laws governing the chain of command. Some retired officers violated Article 88 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice by slandering their commander-in-chief. Others publicly were on record calling for the military to intervene to remove an elected president. Some of the nation's top officials in the FBI and Intelligence Committee have misled or lied under oath to federal investigators or U.S. Congress, again, mostly with impunity. All these sustained revolutionary activities were justified as necessary to achieve the supposedly notable ends of removing Trump. Anything you have to do, by any means necessary, we've got to get him out of here. The result is third world-like jurisprudence America aimed at rewarding friends and punishing enemies, masked by service to social justice. We are in a dangerous revolutionary cycle, but the threat is not so much from loud, buffoonish one-day rioters on January 6th. Such clownish characters did not, for 120 days, loot, burn, attack courthouses and police precincts, cause over 30 deaths, injure 2,000 policemen, and destroy at least $2 billion in property, all under the banner of revolutionary justice. Last summer, yeah. Even more ominously, stone-cold sober elites are systematically waging an insidious revolution in the shadows that seek to dismantle America's institutions and the rule of law as we have known them. Right on point.
Describes that very often used analogy of the frog in the water.
Yeah,
that's slowly coming to boil. He doesn't even know what's going on until he's dead.
Till he's dead.
Yeah, that's the silent insurrection that's been going on.
Yeah, and of course, I'll never get over the CNN story on Kenosha. The Crying said, fiery but mostly peaceful demonstration. The guy standing here with a microphone, a burning building behind him. Mostly peaceful demonstrations. So that wasn't so quiet. We knew what was going on then. But we didn't do anything about it. We being the cops, the mayors, the city officials, etc.
You know, when you look at everything in as far as even facts and numbers and stuff, I mean, this is not a whataboutism. This is a direct factual comparison of what happened January 6th last year, the BLM riots of 2020,
yeah,
which was horrendous. Talk about cops being injured and killed. And then a lot of people forget about the riot that happened during the inauguration in 2017 in D.C., which lit D.C. on fire.
That's right.
And I don't think anybody was prosecuted for that.
Yeah. Well, but that was because of Trump, see?
Yeah.
It makes it okay. So on the insurrection, I'm a little bit too pedantic when it comes to vocabulary. I don't want to hear people talking about a return to normalcy. We can return to normality. And I reminded our international radio listening audience just a couple days ago that the word February has 2 R's in it. So I think it's really important to call things by the proper name, by their correct name. What happened on January 6th last year was not an insurrection, not even close to an insurrection. As far as I'm concerned, this is what happened. An unruly, undisciplined, unorganized mob trespassed at the Capitol and rioted, committed some property damage, hurt a few people. No one died during that riot, with only one exception. The left, of course, had somebody die because he was hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, and that just turned out to be wrong. The guy died of a stroke after he left the Capitol building. 4 people died, but not as a result of the riot. Heart attacks, whatever, natural causes.
Suicides also.
I beg your pardon?
There were a couple of suicides also.
Okay, yeah. But the one person that was killed because of the riot was Ashley Babbitt, who was shot by a Capitol police officer. And from what I've read about it, and even the left hasn't tried to lie about this, she was shot in cold blood. There was absolutely no cause to use deadly force on her. No one was in danger of life. Not the cop or nobody else. He killed her. He shot her dead. So that was the only death. But, of course, that really gets played down. There was no prosecution of that officer. He probably got promoted. So you had an undisciplined, unorganized, unarmed mob that invaded the Capitol and rioted. Many of them got there an hour before Trump's speech. There's absolutely nothing to show that Trump coordinated this. Trump gave a speech, and I'll get into that in this article here by Turley. Let's take a short break, and we'll come back to Turley versus the insurrection.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A winter storm hits the South. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The storms covered parts of the South with snow, sleet, and freezing rain, tying up roads in Tennessee and Kentucky as it takes aim for the Northeast. Nashville got 6 inches of snow, and parts of Massachusetts may get 8 inches or more. New Jersey issuing a state of emergency and warning about high winds that could down power lines.
If that wind gets over 40 miles an hour, those repair people cannot go up in a bucket. It's dangerous. They could die, get injured.
Joe Fiordaliso with New Jersey Public Utilities. Monday's snowstorm slammed the South and trapped hundreds of drivers on I-95 in Virginia for more than 20 hours. Virginia also under a state of emergency. Chicago public schools will be closed for a 3rd day on Friday as the teachers union and the city fight over classroom COVID safety protocols.
The city and the union have now each filed unfair labor charges against one another with state officials as they also continue to try to work out a deal.
Fox's Garrett Tenney. 1 year after the Capitol riot, Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, like President Biden, blames then-President Trump for the attack.
He was urging people to fight like hell. You have to look at the extent to which he had been for months.
Cheney talking to Fox News.
I also think that you have to look at what he has said since. He continues to suggest that the violence on January 6th was justified. When he says November 3rd was the insurrection and January 6th was a protest.
Former President Trump fuming over being blamed for the riots, issuing a message saying this political theater is just a distraction for the fact that Biden has completely and totally failed. And a down day on Wall Street, the Dow slid 170 points. America's listening to Fox News.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
News.
South Dakota makes it harder for women to get abortions.
Lawmakers approving Governor Kristi Noem's rule requiring women to make an extra visit to a doctor to receive the second of 2 drugs used for an abortion. Women usually get both drugs in one visit and take the second medication at home. The Republican governor initiated the change by executive order in September ahead of the FDA's decision last month to eliminate the requirement for women to pick up abortion pills in person. Doctors argue making it harder to get the second drug could create more complications because not taking that drug increases the risk of hemorrhage. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
A dramatic surge in COVID cases has sidelined more than 800 Los Angeles police and firefighters. It's also led to slightly longer ambulance and fire response times. New unemployment claims rose last week, but stayed near the lowest levels in 50 years.
The number of people signing up for unemployment last week rose by 7,000 to 207,000. It's slightly more than forecast. Economists have been looking at the numbers for signs of layoffs tied to the Omicron variant of COVID, and the holiday season and after can impact reporting. Ginny Cosola, Fox News.
And country singer Morgan Wallen charts the most popular album across all genres of music in 2021.
Wallen overcame every possible obstacle last year after being caught on video using the N-word. He was banned from country radio, lost his management and record label, and was cut out of all the award shows. According to research from MRC Data in cooperation with Billboard, the album was the top country album and the most popular album across all genres, with 3.2 million equivalent album units earned during the year. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Refresh goes on at Subway. You've tried the Cali Fresh steak. Now you can enjoy the Cali Fresh turkey. One of only 2 Cali Fresh subs The Cali Fresh Turkey is packed with deli-thin, oven-roasted turkey piled high on a bed of hickory smoked bacon, smashed avocado, and fresh mozzarella. Crafted for premium freshness, the Cali Fresh Turkey is made on freshly baked, hearty, multi-grain bread with your choice of fresh veggies, hand-sliced daily in restaurants. Treat yourself to a Cali Fresh Turkey today. Subway. Eat fresh.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. Zero down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Show here on Tall Tales. I'm afraid we've taken these halftime shows for granted. They're spectacular. They get better and better every day. Okay, so at the break I was talking about the quote insurrection. Now the left likes to use that word because it sounds so menacing and so terrible. And insurrection. Now, when you use that word, what you're talking about is usually an armed group of people trying to overthrow a government, right? And that is not even close to what happened. We had a disorganized, unarmed mob that invaded the Capitol, did some property damage, et cetera. The only person that was killed was somebody shot by the Capitol policeman. As far as I can see, was shot in cold blood. The rioters got to the Capitol building an hour before Trump finished his speech. Trump gave a pep talk to the folks that were gathered on the January the 6th. And the gist of his pep talk was this. Several members of Congress, both senators and members of the House of Representatives, had planned on challenging the elections in their own district, which is the law. That's how you challenge an election. You do it on the joint section, in the joint section of Congress on the 6th of January. It's happened before. It happened in 1876 with the famous Hayes-Tilden controversy. The Democrats have done it several times in the 20th century. So it's nothing unusual. And it was not a senseless gesture because the 6 battleground states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, let's see. Give me
Georgia?
No, they're not southern states.
Oh. That's the only ones I can think of, right?
Yeah. Take a look, Jose. Yeah, anyhow, the 6 battleground states, a total of 25,000 votes in all 6 of the states could have caused them to go the other way. And every one of those states violated the Electors Clause of the Constitution, which says that the means of choosing the electors, the members of the Electoral College, shall be decided by the legislatures of the states. In some states, it was the governor, the election commissioner, etc., all in the name of, well, you know, COVID, so we're going to let people do things that we wouldn't ordinarily let them do. Mail in their ballots. We'll mail out ballots to everybody, that sort of thing. So in those 6 battleground states, If they had gone the other way, Trump would have won and Biden would have lost. Plus, there was enough reports of other irregularities in other states that it seemed to me that it was a worthwhile gesture. Now, the smart money over there and the easy, lazy boy chair is going to say, well, you know, Trump never won any of those lawsuits, which isn't exactly true. And many of the lawsuits never went to trial. Election lawsuits are notoriously hard to maintain because it's hard to get a hold of the facts to build your factual record, because the people that you're suing are the folks that ran the elections. They're not going to be very cooperative. It takes a long time to do it. If you start too early, your case is not ripe. If you start too late, it's moot. The judge is going to tell you, you can't wait until after the election and then make some of these challenges. You can't wait and see what the results are, and if you lose, challenge. So the courts were not a very good mechanism for determining whether or not there was election fraud. The joint session of Congress would have been the exact place to do that. But because of the riot at the Capitol, several senators and congressmen that were going to raise the challenge didn't do it. So if Trump sponsored that rally, if he encouraged it, if he coordinated it, he was working against himself, because he would have been much better off had there not been a riot and those challenges gone forth. Now, my friend Jonathan Turley does a pretty good job of laying this out. Here's what he says. This is the 1-year anniversary of the disgraceful rioting in the Capitol building. The scenes of that day are seared in the memory of many of us. I publicly condemned Trump's speech while it was being given, and I called for a bipartisan vote of censure over his responsibility in the riots. However, I have long maintained that there is no evidence to support a criminal charge against Trump for incitement of a riot. Yet a year ago, various legal experts declared that Trump should be charged based on his speech and his delay in calling for protesters to leave Capitol Hill. District of Columbia Attorney General Carl Racine, his last name is Racine.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, I read somewhere that he changed it. He was born Carl Kenosha, but he changed his name to Carl Racine. Announced that he was considering arresting Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Rudy Giuliani, U.S. Representative Mo Brooks, Snow White, and 3 of the dwarfs, and charging them with incitement. So a year later, whatever happened to the prosecution of Donald Trump? Racine and others were not restrained by Republicans in Congress and clearly were eager to make the, quote, clear case for prosecution. The fact is they were restrained by the Constitution, and the media attention over their dubious claims quietly faded away like so many other slam-dunk charges highlighted on cable news programs. We won't mention MSNBC here. Democrat politicians and commentators are still demanding that Trump be criminally charged. Former Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill, she's from Missouri, now an NBC analyst, recently declared that Attorney General Merrick Garland would go down in infamy as one of the worst attorney generals in this country's history if former President Donald Trump is not charged. Garland seemed to respond to the pressure this week by pledging that his department would charge anyone responsible at any level. Yeah. Those 3 words revived the hopes of many on CNN and MSNBC, which spent 4 years trafficking in often unfounded theories of criminality against Trump and his family. Indeed, many of the same legal experts reappeared to offer assurances that Trump can still be frog-marched to the Hooskow. There's a word you don't hear very often. There aren't many good Western movies anymore, you know. If you saw very many Western movies, you'd be familiar with the word Huskow. Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
It sounds Russian, though.
Huskow?
Huskow.
No, that's the capital of Russia.
Oh. Who's on first?
Who's on first?
Whose cow is on first? Continue.
All right. It's all too familiar. Just a year ago, cable networks were riding high on ratings by offering a steady diet of blockbuster stories establishing criminal conduct by Trump or his family. Former House Counsel Norman Eisen was assuring viewers that Trump was colluding in plain sight, and the criminal case against Trump for obstruction of justice was overwhelming. Professor Richard Painter was explaining the clear case of treason against Trump. Professor Lawrence Tribe declared the dictation of a misleading statement about Trump Tower meeting constituted witness tampering. Tribe further claimed strong cases for obstruction of justice, criminal election violations, Logan Act violations, and extortion by Trump or his family. Others explained that Trump could be charged with negligent homicide over the Wuhan virus crisis. So I think the rule here is that if you can't say something bad about Donald Trump, if you're a Democrat, if you can't say something bad about Donald Trump, just don't say anything at all. The same figures were back on January 6th to declare the Trump speech to be sufficient for prosecution. Legal analyst Eli Honig said he would gladly show a jury his inflammatory remarks and argue they crossed the line to criminality. Professor Richard Ashby Wilson said Trump crossed the Rubicon and incited a mob to attack the Capitol as Congress was in the process of tallying the electoral vote results. Trump should be criminally indicted for inciting insurrection against our democracy, Lawrence Tribe declared. The guy was inciting not just imminent lawless action, but the violent decapitation of a coordinate branch of the government, preventing this peaceful transition of power and putting a violent mob into the Capitol while he cheered them on. So what happened? Even if you assume that Trump was protected by his own Justice Department, it was only a matter of days before the Biden administration was in place and ready for new prosecutions. District of Columbia Attorney General Carl Racine announced that week that he was investigating Trump for a possible incitement charge. He was heralded in the media with global coverage. Then nothing happened. The reason is that the speech itself was not a crime. Indeed, it was protected free speech. They knew that a court would throw out such an indictment, and even if they could find a willing judge, any conviction would be thrown out on appeal. In a case called Brandenburg versus Ohio, the Supreme Court ruled in 1969 that even calling for violence is protected under the First Amendment unless there is a threat of imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. It's common for political leaders to call for protests at federal or state capitals when controversial legislation or actions are being taken. Indeed, in past elections, Democrat members also protested elections and challenged electoral votes in Congress, but it was different. That was them and instead of us. The fact is that Trump never actually called for violence or a riot. Rather, he urged his supporters to march on the Capitol to express opposition to the certification of electoral votes and to support the challenges being made by some members of Congress. Just like I said, He expressly told his followers to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Trump also stated, now it's up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. He ended his speech by saying a protest at the Capitol was meant to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, the kind of pride and boldness they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. Such marches are common on both federal and state capitals to protest or support actions occurring inside. Notably, the Ku Klux Klan leader Clarence Brandenburg versus Ohio, referred to a planned march on Congress after declaring that revengeance, well, you can ask for revenge, you could talk about vengeance. Clarence Brandenburg, revengeance. No wonder they prosecuted him for murdering the English language. Yeah. Plan to march on Congress after declaring that revengeance could be taken for the betrayal of the president and Congress. The Supreme Court nevertheless overturned his conviction. Likewise, in Hess versus Indiana, the court rejected the prosecution of a prosecutor declaring an intention to take over the streets, holding that, quote, at worst, words amounted to nothing more than advocacy of illegal action at some indefinite future time. In NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware Company, the court overturned a judgment against the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Boy, are those people out of sync with the woke world, huh? After one official declared, if we catch any of you going in any of them racist stores, we're going to break your damn neck. That was ruled as hyperbolic language of advocacy. Nothing wrong with it. That is why Racine did not arrest Trump, even after he left office shortly after the riot. The House is still trying to generate new evidence not found by the Justice Department. Despite arresting hundreds and investigating thousands, the Justice Department never found an insurrection or a rebellion to be charged. Instead, most people were charged with crimes like trespass or unlawful entry. A few faced more serious charges of assaulting officers. This remains a protest that became a riot due to the reckless rhetoric of the rally and the lack of preparation by the Capitol. None of that belittles the responsibility of those who rioted or excuses their conduct. These individuals are being rightfully prosecuted and have been given severe sentences given these charges. Moreover, the House could still find that smoking gun evidence that supports a criminal charge against Trump. Yet the media is hyping bombshell disclosures that do little to move that needle. For example, Vice Chair Representative Lynn Cheney, who has a petition before the court to change her name to Benedict Arnold, recently announced that they had proof that Ivanka Trump asked her father to issue a statement to encourage protesters to leave the Hill, but President Trump still delayed in making such a statement. That's not a crime. Being callous or slow in making public statements may make you a bad person or a bad president, but it doesn't make you a criminal. This is not some form of nonfeasance and failing to take action required by law. Such a prosecution would allow the prosecution of politicians for a wide array of statements not made in times of political discourse. It would gut the First Amendment. Such analysis is hardly popular with images of rioters smashing windows and the Capitol being replayed on cable networks. It's an age of rage. One must be unequivocal and amplified in your outrage to avoid suspicion. That's for sure, unless you, like I said a little earlier, if you can't say something bad about Trump, better not to say anything at all. I recently told the Washington Post that a viable case against Trump would need to show that he took concrete steps in enabling, anticipating, or coordinating the riot. In response, Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin, she's a peach, who has called for burning down the Republican Party and expulsion of Republican members, declared, "I have no idea what Turley is talking about. I have no idea. You don't need to prove Trump intended the riot. He intended to obstruct Congress. This is what Representative Liz Cheney was explaining last week. An absolutely unimpeachable source, Liz Cheney. That reference to the crime of corruptly obstructing an official proceeding, a charge against some rioters. However, Trump was not among them. Swapping out incitement or insurrection for obstruction does little to address the fundamental constitutional barrier. It would still criminalize free speech and run counter to controlling case law. Democrats in the past challenged electoral votes and have participated in protests over certification. In January 2005, Barbara Boxer, better known as Barb, joined former Representative Stephanie Tubbs Jones to challenge George W. Bush's victory over Democrat challenger John Kerry in the state of Ohio. Boxer argued that Republicans had engaged in voter suppression. You know, you wake up a Democrat in the middle of the night, and he's just, as he's struggling into consciousness, he'll say, voter suppression. Good morning, Mr. Democrat. Voter suppression to you. They can't stop saying that. Many who are condemning the challenge today heaped praise on Boxer in 2004. That is not in itself an obstruction of Congress. For Trump to call for the same opposition is not itself obstruction. It's the rules. Moreover, if Trump is not legally responsible for the riot, he is not legally responsible for waiting to call for the rioters to stop. What the committee would need is evidence that Trump actively withheld resources or obstructed efforts to quell the riot. Thus far, the record shows that refusal of a large National Guard employment was refused on Capitol Hill and not the White House. From the D.C. Attorney General to the current U.S. Attorney General, there has been no paucity of time or lack of investigation over the last year. They certainly know where to find Trump, who is hiding in plain sight at Mar-a-Lago. Indeed, Rubin, who praised Garland's nomination, as did I, recently declared him to be a mistake for failing to arrest Trump. The other possibility is that there was a will, but not a crime. Well, I go along with Turley on Garland being a mistake. I mentioned this the other day when Obama nominated him. I studied up a little bit, and a little bit on the left, but sounds like a workmanlike judge. We have to confirm liberal sometime. It's a year before the end of the term. I think maybe we ought to go ahead and confirm the guy. Mitch McConnell knew better than I did. After seeing what he's like as Attorney General, I'm just saying, boy, was I wrong about that. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field and seventh inning stretch.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, because everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous baby back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Bill's, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life and bigger meals happen here.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR at 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
So here we are back on Tall Tales at Wrigley Field, the world's most beautiful ballpark. Sometimes when I get to Wrigley Field, I see our Carl wandering around on the bleachers, but he's probably on some kind of a really dangerous mission right now, and he doesn't have time for Tall Tales.
Probably an insurrection.
Yeah, or quelling an insurrection. That would be more our Carl's speed. Yeah, when you mention his name around an insurrectionist, they quake in their boots. Yeah. All right, so we're going on here now to let's see, what's the next item on the card here? It's Tall Tales versus Separatists. And I've spent a fair amount of time on this, and I'm going to spend a fair amount more time on it because it's not an easy issue for me to explain. Because it is a classic exercise in the agenda versus the facts. So remember what we talked about at the beginning of the show? Item number 2 is red. It's not orange. Those letters are not orange. They are red. So the purpose of this 20-page insert that ran with the Daily News on December 6th is to gaslight the folks on this island into thinking that Guam should be an independent country, free of the colonizer, the United States. And it can be summed up, the message is colony bad, sovereignty good. So in order to be a sovereign area, Guam has to become independent of the United States. And you won't find a sentence that says, we folks down here at the Independence Commission want Guam to become independent. It's a subtle set of gates. And as you go through each gate, the ticket is to understand that independence is really the best deal for Guam. That's the mission of this whole paper. Now, I've mentioned this before, but they call themselves the Commission on Decolonization, and they were created by Public Law 23-147, which was passed in a lame duck session, but it was a bill from Hope Cristobal. Governor Gutierrez vetoed it. The veto was overridden in a lame duck session, and it is now the law. So if you're not familiar with Hope Christobel, tune in on Monday, because Hope Christobel did a screen test, and we'll run her screen test again, which will give you a really good idea about where the separatists are coming from, what some of their ideas are. I would characterize Hope as the face and voice of the separatist movement. So she named this commission the Commission on Decolonization for the Implementation and Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. There are 11 people on the commission, which I have dubbed a papier-mâché commission, because the commission, the members apparently have no role whatsoever. Melvin Wanpat runs the whole show almost unfettered by any action by the commission. Commission is in the governor's office. Even the governor doesn't seem to have much of a role with respect to the commission. Now, as an example of the gaslighting that goes on, I'll just read a portion of the bill that Hope Christobel drafted, and it was enacted into law. This would be Section 1 GCA, Section 2101, reading it in pertinent part. The United States, as a succeeding colonial power over the lands and people of Guam, acceded to and recognized in the 1898 Treaty of Paris that the political rights of the native inhabitants of Guam shall be protected, and that their collective right to political self-determination is inalienable. Hope is telling us in her bill that that's what the Treaty of Paris said. Well, I cheated. I actually looked up the Treaty of Paris, and this is what it actually says. The civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by the Congress. So the very first section of the law that she enacted starts out like that, in effect lying to the people. So we have this 20-page supplement, and it's put out by the Commission on Self-Determination, which I alternately refer to as the Commission on Chamorro Independence, certain other names. And let's see, I left off last time with the title, What is Guam's legal, I finished What is Guam's current legal status? And you find words like self-governance sprinkled throughout the insert. Self-governance meaning basically independent. And then I'm on page 7, and the title here is Why Change? Talking about Guam's history of colonialism and the present-day acts of colonialism can be emotionally and mentally challenging. I think it was for Jay the other day. I think it was emotionally and mentally challenging for him. However, without education to help understand the colonization, the people of Guam will never realize the change they seek in their society. Now, when I see the word education connected with this outfit, I shudder, because I know exactly what they mean by education. Something more like brainwashing than true education. And I started out talking about this by saying, you know, we need to have a plebiscite. We need to decide whether anybody wants to change the situation we have now, whether anybody wants Guam to leave the American political family and, quote, decolonize, especially when you understand that decolonize can only mean independence. I've explained that the other so-called options are either legally or factually impossible. So that's what we really need. If we're really talking self-determination, we need to vote on that question. And if the answer to that question is no, then we don't need Melvin Wanpat and his commission. I suspect that you would get a strong argument from Wanpat and Michael Bavacqua and what's her name, Laura Sauter, certainly from Hope Cristobal, who would tell you that, you know, if I would advance that argument to her, she'd probably tell me, you're a colonizer, you're a murderer, you're nothing but a colonizer. You just came here because of white suppression. That would be Hope Cristobal's rap for me. But until we decide that, the rest of this is kind of a nonsensical argument. Another part of it that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you know, there's this, and we'll get into this, you know, the Guam's history of colonialism, the Chamorro people, the native inhabitants, etc. Well, let's say that the Chamorro people of Guam really do want to change their status. Isn't it sort of an anomaly that they're using the colonizers' government to achieve that? The government of Guam is, if you want to adopt the separatist rhetoric, the government of Guam is the colonizers' government. It was created by an act of Congress. You look in Title 8 of the United States Code, Title 48 of the United States Code, Section 1421, and you'll find the law, the Organic Act of Guam. And of course, most of the people that enacted that Organic Act in 1950 were white, which is a synonym for white supremacists. So that's the mechanism they're using. If you study World War II, there's a pretty good argument that the folks, the separatists that are involved with the government of Guam are quislings. They've sold out to the other side. Okay, well, I'm going to go into this one paragraph here, but as I've mentioned before, I changed the rules a little bit for this part of the program. I will entertain calls even though I haven't finished this item on the card. So I see that I've got a caller here that wants to make his mark about decolonization. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hey, Bob. You're talking about decolonization. You're talking about independence, right?
That's right.
Okay, what did we just go through starting in the beginning of 2020? The pandemic.
Right.
Okay. What would have happened had we been independent of the U.S.?
Well, I don't know how to... Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. Our main income here, where we generate our ability to function and live economic wise, was tourism. That went into the crapper, and that thing is not going to recover for the next 2 to 3 years, if we're lucky. So had we followed this decolonization and gained independence, you're talking about billions of dollars that was given to the island. That is what's keeping us running for the past 2 years because of non-income. What's going to happen should they decide, okay, fine, we're going to be independent? But with the someone's going to say, yeah, we can be independent, but we don't want to cut the purse strings.
Yep.
See the stupidity there?
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. It's like, you can take we don't want the chicken, but we want the eggs.
It's kind of like the kid. It's kind of like the kid who says, "Well, I'm 18 years old now. I can be on my own. Can I use the car?"
Exactly. So when someone turns around and says, "We need to," and I've said this for many, many years. If we want to show independence, or we declare that we're independent from the U.S., it's ridiculous.
I can't argue with you, Mark.
Yeah, mainly because we have no way. If we go to even the Commonwealth, just like the Northern Marianas, what is their what do you call that, minimum wage? What is the price of goods? They were allowed to open up their area for industry. What was their industry? Manufacturing. which is basically shut down because of all the illegal payments and the sweatshops. So basically, if you want Guam to go down that same road, then of course, declare independence. But before I give up my U.S. citizenship, if Guam wants to be independent, I'm going to move out.
I hear you, Mark.
Because, there's no way we can make up with the absence of the U.S. And to go to the United Nations, which is basically built up of anti-Semitic races, no, nothing. The UN is just there, but they're not there for everybody. They're there for themselves. So to keep relying on the UN, that's a fact. That's a losing battle.
I got to agree with you, Mark. I really appreciate your call. I got to head for Churchill Downs. Good talking to you again.
All right. Have a good day, Bob.
Thank you, Mark.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
So here we are, Churchill Downs. I got about 6 furlongs, and I'll be at the finish line for another week. Much as I dread it, I wish that, that this race would go on and on and on. But Jose and I got to go into limbo here for a couple days, come 1800. So I've got a couple callers here in the green room. I've got R. Carl and another Joe. A poker player would say, now there's a pair to draw to. I guess R. Carl must have flanged up his top secret mission to put down an insurrection somewhere. So I'm glad things worked out for you, R. Carl.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for taking my call. Anytime you want me to call in, I think one of the topics you can bring up is political status, because there's so much at stake. I was born here and I've lived here my whole life. I'm very interested in how this turns out. And like I said, to discount it and say it can't happen is really, I think, a mistake. We really need to take this very seriously. Anyway, the main reason I called is I've called before about some comments that I saw on a post on a site on a Facebook page devoted to Guam politics, and it's actually quite active, and I sometimes pop in there and see what's going on. And some comments by the man that temporarily takes your place while you're off island, Daryl Taggarty.
You mean the alternate host of Tall Tales?
The alternate host,
yeah.
Yes. It really gave me a lot of food for thought, and I didn't want to overwhelmed by trying to state everything he said all at one time, so I kind of spaced it out. He made 3, I think, very important points. One, that in his words, this is all so much political campaigning, posturing is education, and I would call it a kind of like infomercial, marketing, selling the idea of separation with America. The second point he made is, in his words, what's missing is a vision with a detailed description of what post-colonial Guam would look like. And I think the most critical part lacking in the vision is what exactly would the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch look like? Because they've all been criticized.
Carl, aren't you assuming a fact, not an evidence? What makes you think that we would have three branches so often when colonies are split? They wind up with one branch, and it's called a dictator.
Yes, exactly, and I think that's why there's no talk about it, because I believe what's planned is a concentration of power, and I've heard the judicial branch called the colonizers' judicial system, and so the legislative also. I've heard the criticisms about that. So why would they keep it if it's so horrible? You know, and I believe what is very much coming is a concentration of power, which is very, very, very concerning. The third point is what I'm calling about today, and I'll read this comment because I think it really sums it up. It says, Maguette and the rest of the movement is not articulating a future that works, just bitching about the past. And I think a good substitute word for that, a word that you've used before about this constant complaining, is agitating. And one of the three main sort of foundational figures in Marxism and how it's gotten so far, one of them is, of course, Karl Marx. The second is Lenin. And the third is Antonio Gramsci. Lenin is so critical because he understood that Marx was wrong, that Marxism wouldn't just naturally happen through the course of history, that there needed to be professional agitators in the population constantly churning out agitation propaganda, speeches and articles and all kinds of things to agitate the population. And that is what I see happening here, is this constant agitation. First of all, it's very strategic. They've minimized the number of people, or they want to minimize the number of people that can vote. And then they're focusing on this population, constantly agitating them and trying to build resentment in their attitude toward America. And I think this is a very, very critical point. When you see what is going on, it's all very, very strategic, what's happening. None of this is by accident. And to think that they're just going to wing it, if this ever goes through, it's ridiculous. This is extremely well thought through. These are extremely strategic people. I'm talking about the leadership specifically. I'm not talking about people at the bottom. But the people at the top have thought this through very well. And as you've pointed out in this 20-page insert in PDN, it's all strategically meant to move the readers in a certain direction. Everything that's happening is strategically meant to move the population in certain ways. There's nothing accidental here. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts, and I'm glad that I happened to catch those comments by Daryl. They're very thought-provoking. A lot of food for thought there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he is an alternate host of Tall Tales. The selection process, the background checks, the battery of tests, all of the rigor that one has to go through. Jose would tell you, but he's probably too modest to let you know how selective the process is, right, Jose?
There is no measure.
Thank you, Jose.
Well, very good. Obviously, you've chosen well because I really found his comments very on point, and that's why I've called a few times to kind of sift through them, because I think he said some very important things that we need to think about. And,
Jose or
that's my
Daryl?
thoughts for the day.
Or both of them?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. Good talking to you, as usual.
Good.
All right, so we got about 5 more minutes before we get to the finish line here on the home stretch. I've got another Joe who wants to talk about the independence movement. Go for it, another Joe.
Yeah, Bob, I have to agree with the most dangerous guy. It's like advertising. Until it all has to lead to some act of Congress, because nothing happens, nothing moves about an act of Congress. So until they decide that they want to persuade Congress to enact something which changes one's political status, they're going to advertise their point of view, and they're going to attempt to steer public opinion towards their direction, which is as you identified towards independence, which you also highlighted. What do they define as independence and sovereignty, and could it possibly involve a dictator? Hopefully not, God forbid. So yeah, I wanted to say that. That's what it sounds like. Well, watch out for what the motives are, and every time that they have an opinion, say, hey, we need an act of Congress, and and Congress is probably looking for like a plebiscite, some sort of a election that states have an opinion. But yeah, Bob, before you, I just want to say I'm going to miss you guys for the next 2 days to Monday.
Absolutely, another Joe.
And one more quick point is the governor of North Dakota has made it illegal to have abortion pills, and God willing, the whole country goes that way. It was just in the news I heard about South Dakota.
It's a good thing. Good thing to know. Thanks for sharing that, another Joe. Good talking to you.
And the pro-life, anti-abortion ladies here in Guam, you're very popular amongst them, Uncle Bob. I think they want to talk to you sometime in the near future. Anyway, thanks for your time, Uncle Bob, and Happy New Year.
Okay, good talking to you, another Joe. So let's see, I got about 2 minutes to go, Jose. I don't want to start in on this item on the card here dealing with the supplement, so just let me cruise through Facebook here and see what we got. We got Brad Wood, who says, bittersweet Friday again. It is bittersweet, yeah. And Carl Meyer, Friday Tales. All right. Brad Wood, honk, honk. Can't argue with that. Sandra Regis is here. Brad Wood, one bad joke after another. I wonder what part of the show he was talking about.
There's probably many parts of the show he's talking about.
Probably from beginning to end, right?
And we're not done yet.
Yeah, we still got a couple more minutes to tell a couple more bad jokes, right? Let's see. We got Sherry Uriarte and Juanita Machi. We haven't seen her for a long, long time. Welcome back, Juanita. Glad to see your name on the Facebook again. I wonder. I kind of wondered what happened because she used to always be the first one to sign in. Remember? Yeah. Okay, well, here we go. Jose and I are going to disappear into the sunset here, but we'll be back 1600 on Monday. We'll see you then. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A winter storm hits the south. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The storms covered parts of the south with snow, sleet, and freezing rain, tying up roads in Tennessee and Kentucky as it takes aim for the northeast. Nashville got 6 inches of snow, and parts of Massachusetts may get 8 inches or more. New Jersey issuing a state of emergency and warning about high winds that could down power lines.
If that wind gets over 40 miles an hour, those repair people cannot go up in a bucket. It's dangerous. They could die, get injured.
Joe Fiordaliso with New Jersey Public Utilities. Monday's snowstorm slammed the south and trapped hundreds of drivers on I-95 in Virginia for more than 20 hours. Virginia also under a state of emergency. Chicago public schools will be closed for a third day on Friday as the teachers union and the city fight over classroom COVID safety protocols.
The city and the union have now each filed unfair labor charges against one another with state officials as they also continue to try to work out a deal.
Fox's Garrett Tenney. 1 year after the Capitol riot, Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, like President Biden, blames then-President Trump for the attack.
He was urging people to fight like hell. You have to look at the extent to which he had been for months.
Cheney talking to Fox News.
I also think that you have to look at what he has said since. He continues to suggest that the violence on January 6th was justified. When he says November 3rd was the insurrection and January 6th was a protest.
Former President Trump fuming over being blamed for the riots, issuing a message saying this political theater is just a distraction for the fact that Biden has completely and totally failed. And a down day on Wall Street, the Dow slid 170 points. America's listening to Fox News.